Hello and welcome to Live in the Tzolkin. Today we have a special announcement that we are starting a 1-year-long Maya day-keeping class, which will be held once every 2 weeks on Saturday morning Mexico City time. Also, there will be a chat where you can ask questions and get answers throughout the Trecena. So if anybody is interested in learning more about Mayan culture and Mayan daykeeping, you can click the link in the description of this podcast. And I hope everyone enjoys today's episode.
Hello, hi, my name is Apapianteu. I'm here from the highlands of Maya, Guatemala. That it means I'm a Quichua person. As I said, I'm an I can be a guide on the road and a ceremonial here. Chant, how are you all?
I'm doing very well. I'm on the day here today in Japan is Hun Fi, so I'm beginning a new Trecena, or Oshlahu Kinem.
Perfect. It
And
is
for you,
good to know that in the opposite side of the world now, Oshla is not really ruling. In the old times, back in the day, Oshla was a ceremonial day for doing the celebration of the fire as such. There has been a lot of stuff changing in the highlands, even in some isolated and remote areas. Still, some stuff arrive and change stuff. But back in the day, Oshla was always celebrated not only as the end of the Trecena, but was a ceremonial days for to do the celebration of the fire. So there, there was because there's always this situation in which the people is asking and asking and asking or going to the mountains and lighting fires and stuff. But Oshla was the day in which the fire as such was celebrated uh, way. There are some places in which there's still that custom follow that tradition of doing the Oshla celebration, but I haven't seen them in the last years, but anyways, being Osh the it is always usually associated with big volcanoes. So, and I haven't been in big volcanoes lately, so who knows? But just to tell you all, that's what was celebrated. Osh ceremonial
well,
day of the fire.
that Oshlahu Trecena was a very, very interesting time. And I know a lot of people had experienced many different things, myself included. You know, I had some very powerful dreams during that week and some other events also. So, is there anything else you'd like to say about the Oshlahu Trecena?
Well, the Oshla Trecena is very complex as such. The continuity in which something that we can call a baton. A baton is the way in which a Nahual does their work, his work, and then at finalizing that, any given Nahual is going to give a baton to the next one with the resolved or unresolved stuff. This concept is unique in the sense of the way in which we as spiritual guides we talk in the highlands. So a nahual has a function. A nahual pertains to a system, as I have been saying, as I said in my book. A nahual can or not, let's say, complete procedures or stuff, or simply the nahual does his job. Then a baton is given to the next nahual to continue. So usually what we can see is that day by day, every nahual is doing something, and then you can see the repercussions of those actions during that nahual beginning to happen in the next nahual. That's the baton, the continuity between nahuals.
So you're talking
Obviously,
about
from one to
passing a baton like in a relay race. So there's sort of the baton that the racer is holding, and he passes to the next one.
Exactly that
Okay,
one.
sorry.
That's what I baton. That's the way. That's what I'm talking about. Because well, there are so many ways in which we speak in Maya, in which you don't necessarily need to have a word that classifies actions. But we already do know that, for example, for a Trecena or for the system, or being working, let's say, giving sense to a totality, for example, at Trecena, every Nahual has to play a function. And whenever the day finished, then the next day is going to begin to do, through the button, doing the next scene, the next work. They do what they have to do, as I have been saying in time. Differently from what we humans are, we need learning, we need to memorize, we need repetition, because if not, memory just vanished. And even experience. There are so many things in which our minds need to be, let's say, feed constantly. We need it. We see it every day in time. Well, the Nahuals don't. The Nahuals don't function by memory. They are already what they are. They don't need, let's say, for the purposes of doing what they are or who they are, if you will want to apply the who to them. What you do need to understand is that they are already what they are. They are already a way of a consciousness, and they don't learn by experience. They just do what they have to do. Is a structure, is a function of a system. They can function, or maybe sometimes you can say, well, maybe this function or maybe not work, which shall be better. But they are already what they are. It's not like us that we can improve. They are already what they are. They need not to improve. They are already, if you would want to call it, an essence, or the way in which we said in Maya, a kush, something that is already a way of our consciousness. So, differently from what it happens, then the Nahuals do their jobs day by day, and when a Nahual finalizes his job, then they give the baton, and then the next begins to act. So that can provide, let's say, like accumulation or something that can lead us to understand how a system works and how all the Trecenas speak about different ways of a systematic action, not only in the human way, in the weather, with the brothers, the animals, with uh, a business, a relationship. It's not only about human. Being human is only to function as a part of something, and the Nahuals can have a repercussion on the human ways, but also on the other realms. So, if we are going to talk about the Oshlahuchtok Trecena, then we have to understand that the previous Trecena was the one devoted for the returning of time and the celebration of the counting of time, that is the Washchibats. The finalizing process of that Trecena is the Oshlahuchachmak. Then is the next Nahual, the Oshlahuchachmak. Then is the next Nahual, Hun Noh, which is going to lead to 13 Toch. And well, now we have another system, which can be read very easily, anyways, but you need to have some training in understanding Nahuals. But, anyways, beginning the previous Trecena, it begins with a simple thought, hun no, thinking, having an idea. What do you have at the end? You have to burn Oshlahuch in big Oshlahuch quantities, Oshlahuch payment to pay big. So it is not that having automatically, and it's not like if I do have an idea, I automatically have to pay. No, but that is one of the functions. If you will want to initiate, to start, to begin with something, if you're already pondering or having decisions, This is a Trecena that is going to tell you, okay, that's okay, but you have to pay for that. You have to do your effort. And it's not necessarily to talk about Oshlahutoch, it's not necessarily to talk about like going to do a ceremony in the top point of a volcano. No, it also can mean that you have to make your big effort. You have to do your big sacrifice. If you do love an idea, well, you will have to really, really work hard, sacrifice, and let's say apply that inner fire to get it. That is one of these, and I'm only applying the number 1 and the number 13, but for the analysis of Trecenas, every Trecena you can do the same exercise. What is the meaning? What is the conceptualization, if you will want, in the level of the human brain and comprehensions between idioms? But anyways, that's this is a simple way in which you can understand how a Trecena functions. So there's a lot of ceremonies that can be done during the Oshlahut, the 13th Trecena, and the ways in which the system functions. Well, you can apply intervention here and there, or you can just let it go and experience. But anyways, that's what defines this Trecena. Do you have an idea? Who knows? Well, you do really would want to have it very well done, or applied, or developed to be done, or to be shared even. Well, you have to Oshlahuktoch. You have to do your big effort. You have to really sacrifice yourself. An idea can begin over the pillow and can end changing the world.
That was an absolutely fascinating breakdown of the Trecena or the Oshlahu Kanim. Is it Oshlahu Kinem? Oshlahu Kanim? How to say?
Well, first of all, Trecena is called Oshlehuk Ichnem. That it means
Nim.
it has a meaning Ichnem. Ichnem. It means like the substance of the days. Oshlehuk Ichnem means yeah, the substance meaning of 13 days. That is Oshlehuk Ichnem.
That is very beautiful, and thank you for saying those words.
And every Trecena, well, now is, I don't know how to say it, but um, I remember that back in the 80s, there was no mention at all. But whenever studies, especially in the academical way, began to enter into understanding more about Maya ways of counting, the Trecena began to appear, but there was not that much information. But there was a lot of not public information, but in the mountains there were still so many spiritual guides who were already working with that. And by the way, let me tell you, sometimes in the Western world, or sometimes when people begins to understand the Mayan calendar, they just got what is on the internet, and they just got what has been like a common way of talking about the calendar. But let me tell you, and I'm not going to lie to you or to lie to any of the people that is listening, there are a lot or lots of concepts that hasn't been shared with the world yet. As for example, I did talk about the baton and the way in which the Nahuals give their responsibility to the next one the next day, or under the next light, in the way in which Maya ways we talk, the ways in which we talk. And but there are so many other conceptualizations. Let me tell you, this is not the only one, and there are so many things still to discover in the real ways of the Mayan calendar. Well, then in the 90s, I remember that the Mexica, the Central Mexico calendar, was kind of popular and beginning to have more attention, and that calendar had more knowledge about the Trecena, but was still very coded in the ways in which the calendar was thought in ancient times, and also the repercussions and the influences of the medieval Catholicism that was brought with the friars and the way in which they talk about or what they said about the counting of time. So, but there's one thing that I have always been saying, and I don't want to be rude about, but the Mexica calendar lost the direct communication or the direct retransmission of knowledge in the oral ways. There was a moment in which there were no specialists, there were no people talking about, there were no Central Mexicans or Central Aztecs or Mexicas or Toltecs or people who knew that knowledge in the sophisticated way. So what happened in the 80s and in the 90s is that most of the knowledge that we know is something that is a reinterpretation. And I'm not going to say that is good or bad. I'm not going to make that mistake, but it's a reinterpretation mostly based in our contemporary ways of looking at what was behind or what was before. And some of them are very folklorical, as for example, when people do the interpretation of a bird like an eagle or the day eagle, well, they just follow the folklorical ways of talking, but it's more deep, it's deeper than that. What is positive, and in this case, I'm going to apply the word about the Quiche, the Cachigel, the Sutujil, the Aichi, some calendars, is that there were good oral ways in which the calendar was preserved and the knowledge to be preserved and let's say applied. So that's one of the things that I really love about the Quiche calendar, that it holds that, let's say, that old, that ancient flavor or that ancient conceptualization that usually does not have that way of a folklorical ways of understanding knowledge. And that's one of the beauty things of learning the Oshla the Trecena Maya, when you are in the mountains with a real specialist, well, you are going to hear so many things that people usually don't listen, or things that has no the benchmark of the Western world or the way in which we interpret things now. It is very beautiful when you talk Maya, when you speak in Quiche, and then you listen to a grandfather or a grandmother and they are talking to you in ways in which you say, "Wow, that's amazing." Well, it makes sense, yes, but that's the beauty of having a calendar based on the retransmission of knowledge in oral ways, in oral vias, during centuries, and that's what is not in the other calendars. But anyways, efforts can be done. I am positive about that, but in the with the working with the Quiche calendar, it's very very beautiful to see that the authentic knowledge that was retransmitted during generations.
Yeah, that's very rare and very special. And I also am very thankful that we have a chance to learn from that. It's amazing and beautiful information.
Yes, it is very beautiful. The most and let's say I was talking with a friend the other day, and a student, well, not by a student, by a person that studies the Mayan calendar, and we were kind of preoccupied. We were talking about the internet, and we were like, we have been during almost decades now, talking about how people get very easily attracted to this new age trashy calendar that is the Argüelles calendar, and we were talking how it fascinates people. Then we jump to talk about um, uh, what has been since the 90s, when the civil war in Guatemala stopped, when stories in Mexico begin to be more, let's say, even shared with people, when epigraphies began to understand the writing of the ancestors, and when information begins to come. some spiritual guides began to share, especially from Guatemala, from the southern Guatemala, and anyways, there's not that much, and sometimes what people forget, and this that I'm going to say, I think is very important. Sometimes people does not understand that the authentic Mayan guide, the authentic counter of days, the authentic let's say the person that really carries time for the counting of time is a person that is devoted not only to enlightenment. There's enlightenment, there's knowledge, there's clarity, there's a lot of things that are very beautiful, but mostly the calling is for to take care of the community, the well-being of a community, the well-being of a town. There are still some organizations in some places in which there's still an ahig for the entire town. There's an ahig for the alashik, that is the lineage. There's an ahig for the canton, that it means the neighborhood. And you can escalate those hierarchies, but when dealing with people in the internet, the only thing that you can find is always an ego-driven gurus of the calendar who does not know, or who does not, sometimes they don't even speak Maya, which is like, what? How can you understand a system of counting the days without knowing the real meanings of the days, by the way? But anyways, usually is in that way. And the real Ahir not only speaks Mayan and understands systems and is capable of understanding more, like I said, like the pattern, that can understand more and more and more. But but the purpose is that it's the common well-being of the, let's say, the lineage, yeah, or the town or the neighborhood, and we always have that heavy task of being understanding and doing work for the community. But in the internet, there's only people who is ego driven gurus talking about things like stuff. So for to understand, really understand, and go deep to the Trecena, well, you have to do a little bit more effort and maybe to find a good ahir that can tell you stuff. For example, I was telling my friend that I talked moments ago. I was telling him that, for example, in my town, uh, and surrounding areas, there's still a high degree of respect for the spiritual guide that also goes to mass. Sometimes we think that Mayans were isolated, or that some, and it is true, there are some people that is living in helmets or in very remote areas who only practice the Mayan calendar. That is true. But in a sense, they live that world in that sense. I know a couple of communities in which I'm very well received. I'm fortunate in that sense. You can only arrive by horse or in a motorcycle. But anyways, there's still these people, yeah, and they do perform secret stuff, and you cannot imagine. But at the same time, if you're a public person and you work for the community, there's still a high level of respect for the Ahir that, for example, attend mass, or that they go to do the communal work in town. And people will suspect, like, how I'm going to trust that man that also is still colonialized or is still doing stuff for the church. But that is not the point. What an Ahig from a real Ahig tradition goes to mass, what is showing you is that he's devoted to everybody. That he has no distinctions. That differently from what happens when you enter into a religion, that you have only to worship this god or the other god in the ways they talk to their prophets or whatever, and that suddenly that starts problems like mine is the good, mine is the best way, mine is a blah 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 blah. The authentic spiritual guide goes to mass, attend parties, goes to different places, and that is a way in which he shows or she shows that he or she is open to everybody, that there's no problem, that there's no distinction, that our spirituality and knowing the Mayan calendar is not going to produce a differentiation like, okay, now I'm a cosmic Mayan and I am whatever this stupid name they had in their novels, and making a differentiation. The real, the authentic spiritual guide blends with everybody and flows with what the community in the community and doing what the community needs. For example, I when I began some decades ago, I was already a musician, and at the beginning I was not that like, well, I have to attend mass with my teacher or stuff like that. Years later, I was playing music for the cofradia, the brotherhoods, playing music for the spiritual guides, playing music for myself, playing music in in the Mayan ultra orthodox ceremonies, and there's no contradiction. The authentic ways of doing everything is when you as the universe serves all, serves everybody. Your shamanic calling was not to produce problems, was not to start wars, was not to differentiate people in the way for the way in which they believe. In our case, that's not a rule. That's not even a suggestion of something. And those are who really uh, hold the ancient ways are not going to tell you. I'm going to give you a lesson, and there's no Don Juan, and there's no beings like working that way in this world. There could be some very isolated people who knows a lot, but anyways, they are not going to be like prophesying or telling you what to do or what not to do. It's always an open path. Are you there?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. I wasn't able to listen to you from a minute or something, but now I can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay. Good. Well, anyways, the I could hear you very clearly, so it was a very good topic for the podcast. But anyways, my comment was that this is a very good thing to talk about because it really changes or clarifies the idea of the role of a spiritual guide.
Well, yes, the Western world or the hegemonic ways of thinking, the contemporary ways, will always, and you can see it not only in the spiritual way, but also in professions from university, will always push you not to work in group. Mostly these ways, contemporary ways, isolates the people, and usually and by the way, I found it beautiful, positive, to look for enlightenment. That is good. To understand a system, an ancient system of peoples that you didn't listen to them, that you weren't born in those lands, or As for example, people does not. There are people that follows the Maya trashy galactic Argüelles calendar, but there's also people that does not know that there's still a calendar that is followed very rigorously by people. And I found that, well, maybe it's okay, yeah, to look for enlightenment, for knowledge, but in the way in which the calendar has been managed in the real communities, in between the peoples of towns, there's a responsibility not only for the knowledge that you hold, but to use that knowledge. And let's say, for example, there's a person in Montana, I'm going to say something, or in, I don't know, in Colony, Germany, or I don't know, there could be a person um, in some place interested in understanding the Mayan calendar. It's okay, just learn it. And even you can do it in now. If you will want to follow me, you can follow me online. And there are some other good people, not very well known, but don't follow our ways. But anyways, if you would want to know, you can understand, you can, but one of the things that you can do is to begin to apply it, and not necessarily for immediately say, well, I'm going to read your destiny, or I'm going to do your astrological Mayan chart, and I'm going to charge you $200, or no, that is not helping the community. But if you don't really do, but the Mayan calendar is always for to understand and for to give a community sense of well-being, and it can be your family, it can be your friend. It has to be applied in your life immediately, or it can change your life immediately. But also the Mayan calendar has its social repercussions, and better and even better, the responsibility of knowing that what you know can help the others. And because just in acting in selfishness, knowing all the hours and stuff, well, maybe you can understand things about you, and you can be a little bit selfish about that. But anyways, that knowledge can help so many people that, as I said, in the Mayan tradition, what you find it's a leader, not an isolated monk in a cave. What the Maya people is expecting in your town or in your community is that you're going to live, not that you're going to escape, not that you are going to find a refugee in your altar and asking just for money, or just, as I said, and you are not an isolated monk living in distant places, avoiding human contact. In this way, you're immediately tasked to lead, to talk, to guide, to make decisions. And that is the real point of becoming one of the things of becoming an spiritual guide, the one that holds the knowledge, but also that makes the effort for the common well-being.
That's a very fascinating thing to contemplate, and thank you for saying that. It's very interesting, usually forgotten, you know, part of the discipline.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, as I said, what I have been seeing in the last 20 years, let's say at least the last 2 decades, is that obviously, as it is happening with everything, the Western world, or the hegemonic ways of doing stuff now, makes you more selfish, materialist, and stuff like that. We have been fighting that, and we know about that. We know that the world isolates you to just to think about you, but in our ways, it's very different. You have to really think about the others. For example, in one of the things that I didn't write in my book because it was too personal in this way was that, in a sense, when I began to work and when I began to walk, let's say, to find ways even to arrive to the lands, to find good spiritual guides, to find solutions and stuff. For me, uh, what I was what I was looking for originally, it was to save my life because I was having problems. And by the way, not organical problems in the sense of having a disease or having an stress or having repercussions, let's say, based on actions, discipline, or lack of discipline. I was experiencing so many stuff during dreams that I haven't had any idea of how I was afraid of going to bed. And even in bed, I you can picture me with lights and lamps and let's say battery based lamps, and I was surrounded by all kind of things to help me in case of having a bad dream, a difficult dream, or listening to voices, or sensing presences, or whatever. But I was always very occupied. And by the way, this personal history, because uh, as a kid, I was no more than 7 years old when I began to. I was even 6 years old when I began to do experiments with electricity, with wires and stuff. And I was causing problems in the house because I was producing shortcuts time after time. But what I really do wanted was to have let's say, like a system of lights in my bed and in a moment in which I will experience something, I will turn on lights. And it helped that it helps me during decades, years. I don't know. I cannot make, at least, if I'm talking about being 6 year old, at least 12, 13 years it helped me to go to bed and to have a safe key in my mind that was like whenever something happens, I'm going to turn on light. But when I was a teenager, that symptomatic stuff or everything that was happening was too much. And when I began to ask for help or something, it was an authentic way of looking for healing, for help. And if in my house I was safe with my lights and everything, when I was traveling, that was so horrible. But beautifully, what I found was guidance, even happiness, my happy teacher, and stuff like that. And I began to heal. But then I was little by little introduced to the Maya calendar. I was looking at stuff, I was looking at the functioning of numbers and nominals and all this stuff. And guess what? At the end, uh, what was initially a way of looking for my own healing, at the end was discovering the way of healing everybody. So I began to understand that looking for myself, I found the universe. Or looking for my own answers, I receive answers for everybody. And then later I discovered that healing the others was healing myself.
Hello, thanks for listening to part 1 of today's episode. I'd just like to remind everybody that there is a Maya day-keeping class that we are starting, which will be held on Saturday mornings once every 2 weeks, and also in a daily chat throughout the Trecena for Q&A. If anybody's interested to sign up, it's absolutely amazing, and there is a link in the description of this podcast. I hope everybody had a great day and keeps on living the Tzolkin. Cheers, peace and love.